Pledge Night Origins situates its queer awakening within a familiar yet rarely examined space, using the nostalgic frame of an 80s sorority to explore how young women first encountered desire, expectation, and the quiet terror of being seen. Julia, known later as the house mother but here still Scarlett, is introduced not as an authority figure but as a hopeful 18-year-old navigating a world that promises belonging at the cost of self-interrogation. Her excitement about Alpha Tau Zeta mirrors the longing many young women feel to be chosen, protected, and folded into something larger than themselves, especially in environments that market sisterhood as safety. The revelation that the sorority carries unspoken rules about intimacy immediately fractures that illusion, exposing how institutions, built for women, can still replicate systems of pressure and silence. Scarlett's bind, being expected to date one of the founding women to pay her dues, is not framed as coercive spectacle but as emotional destabilization, a moment where desire is demanded before it is understood. For queer audiences, this resonates deeply, reflecting the confusion of being pushed toward experiences that others assume should be easy while having no language yet for one's own feelings. Scarlett's fear is not about the woman herself, but about crossing an invisible line, one she has been taught exists even when no one names it. Turning to Jenna, her best girlfriend, becomes the emotional core of the scene, grounding Scarlett's uncertainty in trust rather than judgment. Jenna represents the role many queer women recognize as the first witness, the friend who listens without ridicule, whose presence offers permission to question rather than answers. Their interaction is intimate not through touch, but through vulnerability, showing how emotional safety often precedes any physical understanding of desire. Scarlett's confession that she has never had a night with a girl is not treated as deficiency, but as honesty, challenging narratives that assume sexuality should arrive fully formed. Jenna's guidance, implied rather than explicit, reflects how queer knowledge is often passed between women quietly, through reassurance and shared reflection rather than instruction. This scene subtly challenges society's discomfort with women expressing love for each other by presenting that discomfort as structural rather than personal, embedded in the sorority's expectations and the era's silence rather than in Scarlett's heart. The 80s setting underscores how little space existed then, and still exists now, for women to explore attraction without it being labeled, commodified, or dismissed. For lesbian viewers, Scarlett's anxiety mirrors the early realization that queerness often appears first as obligation or curiosity framed by others, rather than as self-defined desire. For women more broadly, the scene speaks to the pressure of conforming to roles to gain access, whether those roles involve dating, femininity, or emotional availability. Scarlett symbolizes the self at the threshold, eager but unprepared, while Jenna symbolizes relational grounding, the reminder that one does not have to face transformation alone. The founding woman, though unseen, looms symbolically as experience, power, and history, embodying how older women in institutions can simultaneously offer opportunity and impose expectation. This dynamic mirrors real-world pressures on queer women to justify their feelings through performance, to prove belonging by participating in systems that may not honor them fully. By keeping the focus on Scarlett's internal conflict and her bond with Jenna, the film resists voyeurism, and instead foregrounds becoming, emphasizing that queerness is not a twist, but a gradual unfolding shaped by context. Society's discomfort persists because women's desire, especially for other women, disrupts narratives of innocence and control, and this scene gently exposes that disruption without sensationalism. It invites viewers to remember the first moments of uncertainty, the questions whispered to friends, and the courage it takes to step into visibility even when the path is unclear. For LGBTQ+ audiences seeking authenticity, this opening offers recognition, honoring the truth that self-discovery often begins not with certainty but with trust, and that being seen starts when one dares to ask for guidance instead of pretending to already know. Scene 2 of Pledge Night Origins reframes initiation as moral fracture, following Laura Scarlett choosing to offer Catherine to Miss Williams, exposing how institutions teach women sacrifice intimacy for belonging and how queer desire becomes entangled with loyalty, fear, and aspiration within spaces promising sisterhood, while quietly rewarding compliance alone. Catherine's devotion is portrayed as tender and perilous, a familiar dynamic for many queer women who learn early that loving deeply means proving usefulness, minimizing needs, and accepting unequal stakes, hoping affection will eventually transform into safety, reciprocity, and recognition within relationships shaped by power structures, norms, silent survival patterns. Scarlett's decision to leave the room functions as abdication and self-preservation, reflecting pressures on women to compartmentalize conscience when advancement demands harm, and mirroring queer experiences of stepping aside emotionally to survive systems that frame exploitation as opportunity, tradition, or necessary, right of institutional belonging, control, silence, fear, normalization. Catherine entering Miss Williams' bedroom is staged without spectacle, emphasizing vulnerability rather than titillation, and allowing viewers to sit with the quiet terror of wanting approval from authority, a sensation many LGBTQ viewers recognize from classrooms, churches, families, and organizations where desire collides with obedience, shame, hierarchy, trust, fear, conditioning. Ms. Williams' approving assessment carries symbolic weight, embodying institutional power that validates women conditionally, selecting bodies and hearts deemed acceptable, and revealing how queer longing is often first affirmed through judgment rather than care, teaching individuals to equate worth with being chosen by authority, systems, tradition, fear, silence, compliance, survival. Catherine lying down is framed as surrender of self, not invitation, capturing how devotion can override instinct and how queer women sometimes confuse compliance with courage when love is promised indirectly, especially within hierarchies that blur mentorship, guidance, and emotional dependency dynamics. Power, silence, fear, hope, longing, survival, normalization, conditioning. Scarlett's absence in this moment complicates blame, illustrating how young women navigate impossible choices, torn between friendship and survival, and how queer viewers may recognize past moments where silence felt safer than resistance, even as it later seeded guilt and grief, regret, longing, shame, reflection, growth, memory, accountability, healing, reckoning. For lesbian audiences, Catherine's fear mixed with devotion echoes formative experiences of loving teachers, mentors, or older women, where admiration blurred into desire under unequal conditions, and where the heart learned early to accept imbalance as romance rather than warning signs, boundaries, ethics, care, consent, safety, agency, autonomy, trust, voice. Women broadly may recognize Catherine's hope for friendship transforming into worth, a pattern reinforced socially, where being agreeable becomes currency, and where asserting boundaries risks abandonment, punishment, or erasure, particularly for those raised to equate goodness with self-sacrifice, obedience, silence, duty, fear, conditioning, religion, tradition, family, expectations, norms, control. The 80s backdrop underscores how limited language once was for consent and queerness, yet the scene resonates today because institutions still cloak exploitation in tradition, and women continue negotiating safety within systems that praise loyalty while discouraging dissent or vulnerability, honesty, agency, choice, boundaries, care, accountability, empathy, visibility, justice, change. Society's discomfort with women loving women appears here through silence rather than spectacle, through assumptions that devotion should be selfless and desire muted, reinforcing control by framing queer intimacy as acceptable only when it serves institutional goals: power, hierarchy, obedience, reputation, tradition, morality, fear, order, stability, authority, compliance, silence, normalization. Ms. Williams represents authority without tenderness, not monstrous, but normalized, reminding viewers how harm often emerges from calm approval, and how women are taught to accept emotional risk quietly when validation is offered with a smile by institutions, elders, leaders, systems, tradition, power, hierarchy, norms, silence, fear, conditioning, compliance, survival. Scarlett's complicity mirrors survival strategies many queer women adopt, learning when to look away to protect futures, illustrating that moral clarity often arrives later, after safety is secured, leaving reflection, accountability, and healing as delayed but necessary work of growth, maturity, empathy, repair, truth, courage, visibility, justice, selfhood, responsibility, reckoning. This scene refuses titillation, instead centering emotional consequence, urging audiences to question systems that pit women against one another, and inviting queer viewers to honor tenderness while still naming power, harm, and the cost of belonging within institutions, traditions, communities, histories, silence, fear, obedience, loyalty, expectation, control, normalization, survival, identity. For LGBTQ audiences seeking authenticity, Catherine's vulnerability is recognizable, Scarlett's retreat unsettling, and Ms. Williams' chillingly ordinary, together forming a triangle that reflects how queer women learn desire through structures not built for their safety or flourishing dignity, agency, consent, care, trust, equality, honesty, visibility, freedom, growth, belonging, hope, healing. By ending in stillness rather than resolution, the film affirms that visibility begins with naming truth internally, recognizing complicity without erasing compassion, and believing women deserve spaces where love, learning, and belonging are not purchased through silence, fear, obedience, sacrifice, harm, hierarchy, coercion, tradition, power, control, normalization, secrecy, shame, exploitation.